Hello and welcome back to another Blu-ray review. This is spine number 271 in the Eureka Masters of Cinema collection, and it is a Blu-ray that I was very excited for, and I'm still excited for because I'm only partway through, working my way through this entire release. This is going to be a three-part kind of sectioned off review of this entire release, and it is Son of the White Mare and other early works by Marcel Yankovic. And I'll just go with that pronunciation for now because I'm not sure if it's the right one. Hopefully it's somewhere close to the truth, because that stuff really bothers me. But I tried my best, and hopefully it's it's not too much of a discrepancy on this video. So the Hungarian animation director Marcel Yankovic created a number of animated films in the course of his career, including apparently the longest animated film made in the Western world, which I'm kind of intrigued to check out now that I've kind of watched this film, Son of the White Mare. So this video will be talking about the main film presented on this Blu-ray, and I have to say, it did not disappoint. I have a lot to say about this film. Well, the thing with Son of the White Mare is, I feel like I have so much to say, and I feel like I have very little to say at the same time. Almost nothing to say and everything to say. It's a tricky one, but man, did I love this film. And so the first part of this review will be just talking about the film. And I purposely wanted to I love this image. It's from the early scene of the film. One thing I wanted to do for this, because it's rare that I get to kind of do this, because I like to, when I do these Blu-ray reviews, I like to kind of get some context and watch the extras and kind of tell you some of the behind the scenes information and stuff, and kind of give you a broader scope of what the film is and what it was and what it means now and so on and so forth. Not that I ever go really that deep, and I don't consider myself a professional reviewer, or this is fun for me. It's just a hobby, but I like digging into that stuff. I like talking about it, but I rarely get a chance to just watch a film and then just talk about the film and nothing else, with no other kind of outside interference. I haven't read the booklet, haven't watched the director interview, haven't looked up anything online. I'm just purely going by what the film was presented me with. So part two, I'll talk about the early short films and his first feature film, Johnny Corncob. And then the third video, I'll talk about the whole release as a whole, and obviously the extras and everything else that goes along with it. So this is purely just about the film Son of the White Mare, which was released in 1981. No, yeah, 1981. So just as the 80s were beginning, this film was made and released in Hungary. And I don't know whether it's one of those cases where it just didn't get a wide release around the world. I haven't looked up that information yet, so there it is. The only thing I really know is that it's based on like Hungarian folk tales, or a very specific folk tale, and kind of and it's also, and there's a credit at the beginning of the film that kind of thanks, I forget the exact name, but it's like basically ancient, well, not even ancient, but like older kind of nomads. I did actually look up one of them to see like the general idea of what that group was. It was like nomads and kind of like tribes, and so it's very much this kind of very old kind of folktale. I'm pretty sure that's the origin there, and this film was an adaptation of that. And I was completely mesmerized with this film from the get-go. It's a visual experience. It's a psychedelic experience. It's a kaleidoscopic explosion of color, and I was just so taken with it. And I think maybe at the beginning, just to kind of get my criticisms out of the way, then I can just gush about the film for like 10 minutes. The one thing I can say is that if there's any criticism I could have about the film, is that the story didn't kind of maybe grab me as much in terms of like being invested in what was happening. But I also don't think this is the kind of film where that really matters. And I feel like, because of the way the film's structured and the way that the film is presented, I feel like it authentically captures what one of those old folk tales is really like. It's a fable, it's a fairy tale, and it feels like that, but in a movie, and it doesn't feel like it's, obviously it's an adaptation, but it feels really pure. It feels like a pure representation of the stories that are told around campfires and stuff. And then my main criticism, I would say, is if I was to sum up Son of the White Mare in one word, if someone was to say, just sum it up in one word for me, I would say three. Three. Maybe that's why I'm doing this in three parts. The rule of threes. I don't know if this is a legitimate rule in storytelling, but it's a very clear trope that works and is used a lot in many different forms in storytelling, in movies and in stories and fables and things. And it's essentially, I mean, in comedy, it's used to kind of like there's a gag, and then they repeat the gag, and it's like, okay, I get it. But then the third time, it kind of changes itself and it transforms the whole joke and makes the whole thing funnier if it works. And then in just traditional storytelling, it's, it's like Goldilocks, so you have the one thing, then you have the second thing where it's slightly different, then the third thing which transforms the rest of it. It works very well in comedy, and it works in kind of older stories, I think. But this film, it's all about threes. The original, like the story that sets everything in motion, is about the three sons of the forefather. And I guess I'll kind of go into the story as I talk about this rule of threes thing in the film. So the story is about the son of the white mare. So there's this horse who gives birth to what looks like a young, what is a baby horse? Oh man, that's completely left my brain. But it's a baby horse. You know what that is. And then it kind of looks kind of human. Then it is a human. It's a little boy with flaming yellow hair, and his name is Tree Shaker. And she tells him as he's growing up the legend of the forefather and his wife and these kind of overlords of the world. And they have three sons. And the three sons, they come before the forefather and they say, we want to get married. And he grants them this wish. So they get married and they have three wives.
Országom a tiétek is, palotáim tárva várnak.
And the three wives, it's like, okay, fine, you can get married, just don't go to these three doors. That's what the forefather tells them. So of course the wives, they sneak down, they open the doors, and three dragons come out and kill, and then the three sons die, and then the three princesses are then captured and held with the three dragons. And then little Tree Shaker finds out he's got two brothers, so he's the third son. So there's all these like things coming in threes. But then there are just like little sequences where like something happens and then it happens again for a second time and it's very similar but slightly different, and then you see where it's going and you know that the third thing is going to be the thing that twists the whole thing around. And I did feel a few times like, okay, let's just get to the third part so we can move on with the story, because it wasn't dragging, but it was like, okay, I can see now 5 minutes ahead of time where this is going. But the one thing I give the film credit for, despite that kind of flaw, I think, is that even through the bits where I kind of could predict where things were going, visually, I couldn't predict where things were going. And it was literally, this film is constantly transforming itself from the characters, which at times, literally, these characters will change their whole color scheme frame by frame, and the design of their character will change. Maybe not frame by frame, maybe like every two frames, which is still really like a lot of work went into this film. There's just that's inarguable. Like the amount of changes in design and colors and just everything transforming and things that seem, okay, that's a tree. I can see that that's a tree, and then suddenly it isn't a tree. It's something completely different. And what the film really does well, I think, is it completely disorients you to where it really is unlike anything you've seen before. I'm sure comparisons can be made. It reminded me a tiny bit of René Laloux's films, but in a way also completely different to that, and much more smooth than his films, and kind of yeah, just, and then also a little tiny bit of Lotte Reiniger's work, obviously particularly the Adventures of Prince Ahmed, but that's more in terms of just like I don't know, the style of the colors and the outlines and things like that. But it really is, I've never seen anything like this. And again, I'm no expert on really anything, but the like I said, like it disorients you in terms of like a location. At times, it really feels like you're watching this. The whole universe of this story takes place inside like a little tiny circle, and then we go inside the circle, and the circle expands. That's not literal. I'm just saying that's how it feels. Tree Shaker walks through some woods, and they look like woods. Not really. It's more shapes and colors and vague tree like shapes and things and stuff, and lot of sexual imagery in the film, which I kind of interpreted as kind of, this is a story about birth, rebirth, and kind of the magic of kind of birth as well. and with birth there is sex, and there's a lot of phallic imagery in the film. There's a lot of vaginal imagery in the film. The tree in which Tree Shaker is born, the tree in which he's kind of destined to kind of pick up by the roots and show his strength when he becomes a man. The opening in which he comes out of that is very vaginal, and so it's literally the tree he was born from, right? And when he later on in the film he gets this kind of magical substance and gets one of his brothers to kind of forge it into a sword that he can use to take to the underworld to go and fight the three dragons and free the three princesses. Very classical kind of hero's journey kind of stuff. And this sword, once he gets it, there's like a ready-made sheath in his clothing, which is directly between his legs, and it's just there's no getting around it. I mean, you can look at Alien and say, oh yeah, I guess there's some kind of like phallic and vaginal imagery. And no, this film, I mean, there's no way you can unsee it. When he goes and meets the first of the two brothers, Stone Crumbler, I believe Stone Crumbler, he's kind of just messing around on this mountain, and the mountain is very clearly like two legs, and there's the opening in the middle. Like it's right there. And I don't know what the real the meaning of it as an interpretation you should take, but for me it just felt like just a kind of visual embodiment of this theme of birth, I suppose, and life. That's kind of what I felt was coming through those images. And there's one of the princesses, just her boobs are there. It's a very sexualized image. But I found that the three princesses had three very different designs to them, and that was something I really liked about the film was the character designs. I really liked them. Like there's something. I feel like I've seen similar imagery before, not necessarily in films, but just like paintings, maybe. I don't know, but the style of it I really like, and the kind of the voices, the acting is very strange to me. Connie kind of came in halfway through the film, and she was like, "What's that language? Is that is that Danish? Is that?" I was like, "No, it's Hungarian." She's like, "Oh, okay." She couldn't quite place the language, and then very soon afterwards, she's like, "Oh, I don't like that language because it's very kind of because a lot of the acting is very shouty and stuff." But I was really entranced by the Hungarian language in the film because I couldn't place it, and that just added so much more to the otherworldliness of it. Obviously, for people who are Hungarian, that is not an issue at all, or isn't a kind of a pro of the film, I suppose, or something that they can take away from that enhances the experience. But for me, that's kind of the way I kind of reacted to it because, I don't really know any other languages but English. I know bits of Norwegian. I tried very hard, but I couldn't really grasp it. I know, but in terms of like recognizing what a language is, I know what French sounds like. I know what Spanish sounds like. I know what Italian sounds like. I know what Japanese sounds like. I know what Chinese sounds like. I know what Russian sounds like. I know the sounds of these languages. I know what Norwegian sounds like. I couldn't place Norwegian and Swedish. Finnish, maybe I'd kind of have a bit more of an ear to because I've been watching a lot of Aki Kaurismäki films. But there are these languages that you just kind of inherently know, what they generally are. Okay, so maybe it's like not entirely Spanish. It's like Catalan or whatever. But you get the general sense of a lot of these languages that are spoke throughout the world. But Hungarian, if it didn't feel like it registered to me, which was great because then it just felt like this really was a whole. It wasn't like it took place on another planet. It took place in another existence. It took place in another plane of reality entirely, which was so absorbing. And the film is so colorful. And I could really go on for days about it. I don't want to kind of just sit here gushing about it, but even though I'm enjoying doing that, don't get me wrong. Like the whole sequence when he goes down to the underworld and kind of fights the three dragons, and you're expecting dragons, and I don't know why I expected dragons in a film that was continually showing me how things are not presented in the way you expect. And so, the first dragon is like this big stone golem like character. So he has so Tree Shaker has a fight with this big golem like creature. And then there's the second dragon, and it's like, okay, so here's the dragon with 3 heads. Here's the dragon with 7 heads. It's like, okay, where's this going? And now the next dragon is like this metal tank with all these guns and like, and it's showing you this like evolution almost. It's like, okay, here's the basic kind of like the grunt dragon, just stones and earth. And then here's like the more advanced version where it's just guns and metal and silver and bombs and destruction. And then the 12-headed dragon is just this like it's a city. It's like a moving. It's also reminds me of Mortal Engines, which is a very underrated film from a few years ago. and it's these big kind of like brutalistic kind of skyscrapers that are always, and it's always shifting and changing, and I fucking loved this film. I absolutely adored it. Again, the only thing I could say against it is maybe the rule of threes, where like it's like a three here and a three there, and you kind of see where it's going 5 minutes before it actually happens. And then also, I would say just the I wasn't like, oh, what's going to happen next? It was more, but you let it wash over you. But I just, there are images in this film that will stay with me forever, and I just love the feel of it. I love the tone of it. It was just, I was just like, it felt like it's just imagination exploding in every corner, in a way, almost. And I just, I was a little bit confused at one point because there's a whole sequence where the brothers, they make camp inside the hollow of this big tree. And it's okay, well, today you stay back and we'll go out and try and find the entrance to the underworld so we can go and find the three princesses and save them and all this stuff. So you stay back at the tree and make some soup and kind of, get some rope going so we can kind of go down to the underworld. And this creature turns up, this kind of gnome. And there's this kind of feature of his design, which is like a one eye kind of feature. You just see the one eye. And I felt like that's kind of the design of the forefather from earlier in the film. And so I felt like, okay, so this is a gnome, but it's really the forefather kind of fucking around with what's going on. That was not the case. So I felt like I was misled, or I just put the pieces together in the wrong way. Also at the beginning, when the white mare is telling her son Tree Shaker about, this is the legend of the forefather and all this stuff and the three sons. And so we see that play out. And then Tree Shaker goes off into the woods after he hears the story, and he sees this ghostly image, and it's like, oh, it's his grandfather. So he's the forefather. So as the forefather, did he give birth to the white horse, And the opening, like 5-6 minutes of the film, there's no dialogue, and it's very, you just kind of seeing images. You got to kind of try and piece together what's going on, which is where it reminded me a little bit of The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, where it's less on dialogue, more on just like visual representations of things that are happening in the story, but also abstractions and beautiful abstractions. So anyway, but there's probably more I could go into, but I just loved like the design of it. I love the feeling of it because it felt like one of those old stories, and you can see the tropes kind of coming together, but it really it kind of was a great container for all those tropes at the same time. I talk about how it's a criticism of the rule of threes coming up so much in the film, and not feeling like, oh, what's going to happen at the end or whatever, or feeling, totally gripped in the story. But it's fine if a film doesn't do that. I think if there are other things going for it, and this film has so many other things going for it, and I feel like it pushes the animation form to almost a breaking point, and I love it when animated films do that, because it's the wonderful thing about them is there's no limitations. I mean, obviously there's limitations in terms of like, how detailed you can be in terms of how much money you've got and how much you can push the animators and so on and so forth. But I think Marcel Yankovic did an amazing job, kind of corralling the team that made this movie. Amazing artists, an amazing vision, and just a phenomenal film. I absolutely loved so much about it, and I feel like now that I've seen it and I know those little kind of the quirks of like, it's going to be this, and then the second time, and then loop back around again for the third kind of payoff, I think I'll enjoy it even more, and it might become like a full marks kind of film for me. But beautiful transfer. I'm so glad that a film like this got a 4K restoration, and that he got to oversee this and kind of approve of it just before he died. I think that that's a really, really cool thing, because it obviously is I would assume something he's very proud of, and at the very least, it's a great work. And he got to kind of, I guess, before he died, know that it had been, it had been restored and preserved for kind of future generations to see, and for someone like me to sit down and see it in 2022, some 40 years after it was made, and be completely wowed by it, and feel excited about seeing it again and again. I can't wait to revisit this film. If I had unlimited time, if I didn't have jobs, if I didn't have my two jobs, I'd probably just watch it again straight away, or watch it again very soon, because it's wonderful. And so I'm excited to dig into the early short films and then see what he has to say. Hopefully there's some stuff about this film that he talks about. But it's so many different visual ideas, and it's almost too much in a way, maybe. Like it's such an assault on the senses, but I loved pretty much every second of it. And there's an intangible thing about it. Intangible or untangible? There's something that isn't tangible about the film. There's something I can't put my finger on. There's something about it that I just loved so much that I can't really explain. I guess it's just the overall feel of it and the vibe, and that could be to the way it looks. The landscapes that just look so. There's no real spatial. Maybe that's one other thing that I could say is a teeny criticism, but the more I think about it, it's a strength. Is that the spatial kind of setup of the film, the geography, and kind of the staging, I suppose, is never consistent. So you have like a character standing next to a building. Okay, that's where the building is. I know where that is, and I'm kind of piecing this together in my mind's eye as I'm watching this unfold. And then the next shot, it's the buildings looks completely different. It could be like spinning in the sky or whatever, as the castles apparently do. Um, yeah, and then the character will be suddenly 100 foot tall. It's a reflection that's kind of a completely distorted shape. So it's constantly just like pulling the carpet out from underneath you. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe that's a kind of, hey, you paying attention now. Well, good, because it's not going to matter. That's not what you should be looking at. You should be feeling it. You should be letting it wash over you. Maybe that's the point he was trying to make. I don't know, but there's a lot of that where it's like you think you know where you are. You got a firm footing in the kind of the spatial area of this scene, and then it changes everything. So is that a negative or a positive? I don't know, but it certainly keeps you on your toes. And that was my thoughts on the wonderful film, The Son of the White Mare, or Son of the White Mare, I should say. I'll leave that in for free. So there we go. I will see you in the next parts. Hopefully very soon. I'll talk about the first feature film that he made called Johnny Corncob from 1973, and the other short films as well, which are The Struggle, Sisyphus, and Dreams on Wings. Very excited to check those out. I don't think any of them are going to come anywhere near to this film in terms of my enjoyment of it. But yeah, just based on that film alone, the main feature of this is already one of my favorite releases of the year, and probably one of my favorite MOC Blu-rays, I have to say. I'm just so enamored with this. Yeah, and now that I know where these images are from the film as well, and I love the design of Tree Shaker, the kind of the flowing, flaming hair. It's just so cool, And it's funny. There's some funny moments in the film as well. It's man, I love physical media. I love movies. I love animation. And when I've seen a film I love talking about it. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.